You follow the orders of unelected billionaire Elon Musk and oversaw the evisceration of USAID and a freeze on programs actively saving the lives of vulnerable people around the planet. Food for People, on the verge of famine, already on ships, was halted. Administration of life-saving treatments for horrific diseases was stopped. Your actions have cost human lives already and will cost many more in the near and long-term future. It is despicable, it is shameful, and it is a stain on our nation.
Someone just looked a sitting Secretary of State directly in the eye and said it out loud. Your decisions are killing people. No filter, no diplomatic language, no walking it back. Watch what happens when a career appropriator decides she has nothing left to lose.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will now yield, and it's a pleasure, to the ranking member of the Full Appropriations Committee, Ms. DeLauro, for her opening statement. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Frankel. And honored to be here with the chair of the Appropriations Committee, my dear friend. I want to say thank you for holding what is an extremely important hearing on the Trump administration's budget request for the Department of State. Secretary Rubio, good afternoon. I welcome you to the House Appropriations Committee for your first budget hearing. Thank you for appearing with us here today. As you know, bipartisanship also allows us to govern in the interest of the nation. However, I cannot thank you for your proposal to slash funding for the Department of State by $51.6 billion, an 84% cut to our ability to conduct diplomacy and save lives around the world. But before we talk about your request to suffocate your own department next year, I want to talk about what is happening right now. Mr. Secretary, this administration is dismantling programs that save lives, protect our national security, for the sake of a tax cut for billionaires. It is recklessly and unlawfully freezing and stealing congressionally appropriated funds from agencies, programs, and services across the government. Congress holds the power of the purse. It's right there in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7. And while this administration has engaged in the unrestrained destruction of institutions across our government, nothing compares to the human consequences of what is happening under your watch. I might add that we are, for 2025, we are, in the continuing resolution, we are following the 2024 budget. And there are directives in that budget, and if we are to follow the letter of the law, which is you pass it in the House, you pass it in the Senate, the president signs the legislation, and you have a law. And that law says that for 2025, we are going to move in the direction of the 2024 budget. That is not happening, and we need to question that. There is, as I pointed out, unrestrained destruction of institutions across our government. You follow the orders of unelected billionaire Elon Musk and oversaw the evisceration of USAID and a freeze on programs actively saving the lives of vulnerable people around the planet. Food for People, on the verge of famine, already on ships, was halted. Administration of life-saving treatments for horrific diseases was stopped. Your actions have cost human lives already and will cost many more in the near and long-term future. It is despicable, it is shameful, and
This is the moment the room shifts. DeLauro just named something that almost never gets said on the record in a budget hearing, that the people responsible for oversight were removed before they could do their jobs. The inspectors general weren't fired after an investigation. They were purged before one could happen. That sequencing is not accidental. When you eliminate the watchdogs first and freeze the funding second, you don't have waste reduction. You have a system designed to avoid accountability entirely. And Rubio, who built his foreign policy reputation on knowing exactly why soft power matters, is sitting across from someone reminding him of the person he used to be. What does it mean when a Secretary of State has to be lectured on why diplomacy saves American lives by the opposition? Drop your answer below.
it is a stain on our nation that may never be fully erased. The funding freeze was made under the guise of eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse. But the American small farmers, who feed millions around the world, are not waste, and human lives they support are not either. I'm all for finding and eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse, something Inspectors General Richardson and Martin at State and USAID respectively were tasked with doing before they were illegally purged in the dead of night. The administration has not brought one allegation of fraud or misuse to this committee either. And Mr. Secretary, I know that I do not need to lecture you on what soft power is and how it works. You used to be well aware of how having the world on our side through diplomacy, cultural influence, and through humanitarian role keeps Americans safe and our economy strong and growing. But your familiarity with the irreplaceable role of the institutions you oversee makes it even more baffling as to why this administration has seemingly done everything in its power to estrange us from our allies, sow distrust of America around the world. Insulting and abandoning our allies does not put America first. Cozying up to dictators and accepting lavish gifts from petrostates does not put America first. Taking food from the mouths of the most vulnerable people in the world, millions of whom are children, does not put America first. When we are helping impoverished communities and nations treat diseases, when we are feeding starving children in conflict zones, and when we help ensure villages have drinkable water, we are using and gaining soft power. We do these things because they are the right thing to do. We also do these things because they are in our own interest. They build influence, our global standard, and strengthen our national security. When we retreat from the global stage, China and Russia fill in the gaps, and the world becomes a more dangerous place for Americans. Whose name is on the sack of flour, the door of the clinic, on the school book? The United States of America, period. It must remain that way. Both parties and you understood that in the past. While we only have a few lines of political rhetoric masquerading as a budget to work with, this is what we do know about you, what you are proposing for the Department of State next year. You create a slush fund for the president while abandoning our allies and partners around the world with an 84% cut to diplomats and development experts. You cut educational and cultural exchanges by 93%. You cut support for people in the poorest countries in the world, depriving millions clean water and sanitation, putting them at risk of death from cholera and diarrhea, and depriving them of food and shelter. You cut our ability to cooperate on narcotics control and law enforcement by over $1.2 billion, increasing the threats of transnational crime, terrorism, and drug and human trafficking. This does not make America stronger, safer, or more prosperous. The administration is putting billionaires and our adversaries first. Americans, our allies, and vulnerable people around the world will be worse off for it. As a leading Democrat on the Appropriations Committee, I assure you, we will not stop fighting to protect America's interests and against this administration's dangerous dismantling of our diplomatic and humanitarian efforts across the world. I thank you, and I look forward to your testimony. I yield back.
Thank you very much.
She didn't come to that hearing to negotiate. She came to put something on the record that the mainstream coverage would spend the next 48 hours softening, contextualizing, and ultimately burying beneath procedural language and both sides' framing. So let's say what actually happened in that room. A senior member of the House Appropriations Committee sat across from Marco Rubio, a man who spent years arguing that American global engagement was non-negotiable, that soft power was the invisible armor of national security, and told him, to his face, that his actions have already cost human lives. Not will cost, not may cost, already cost. That word choice is surgical, and it was not an accident. DeLauro has been in that building long enough to know exactly what language lands in a transcript and what language dissolves into committee noise. Already cost human lives is a phrase designed to survive the hearing. It's the kind of sentence that gets pulled into legal briefs, into future investigations, into the historical record. She wasn't just speaking to Rubio, she was speaking past him, to the archive. But here is what nobody is asking. Where was the pushback? Where was the moment Rubio leaned forward and said, "Actually, Congresswoman, here are the lives we saved by cutting the programs that were failing"? Where was the counter-narrative? Because if the administration's position is that USAID was bloated, inefficient, and ideologically captured, and that is a position some serious foreign policy analysts have held, then this was the moment to make that case. Publicly, on the record, with evidence. It didn't happen. And the silence on that side of the table is its own kind of testimony. Think about what this means if you are sitting on the other side of this. If you are a Republican who has spent years defending foreign aid as a national security investment, and there are more of them than the current party line suggests, this hearing is a quiet crisis. Because DeLauro is not making a bleeding heart humanitarian argument, she is making a cold strategic argument. When America retreats, China and Russia fill the gap. When the name on the flour sack stops being the United States of America, that influence does not sit in a warehouse waiting for America to come back. It transfers. It compounds. It becomes someone else's leverage. That is not progressive foreign policy theory. That is the doctrine that hawkish Republicans spent decades building. So why is it now coming exclusively from the left side of the aisle? Here is what supporters of these cuts will tell you. They will say USAID had become a vehicle for ideological projects that had nothing to do with genuine humanitarian relief or American strategic interest. They will point to programs that critics described as promoting specific social agendas in countries that didn't ask for them. They will argue that the inspectors general were not neutral watchdogs but institutional actors protecting their own bureaucratic territory. And they will say that sometimes an institution is so captured by its own inertia that the only way to reform it is to stop its funding entirely and rebuild from the ground up. That is a coherent argument. It deserves to be engaged seriously. But here is what both sides are missing entirely. The mechanism of how this happened matters as much as whether it happened. DeLauro's sharpest point was not about the cuts themselves. It was about the sequence. Inspectors general removed first. Funding frozen second. No allegations of fraud brought to the committee. No documented cases of misuse presented to the people who are constitutionally required to hold the purse. The power of the purse is not a technicality. It is Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7. It is the foundational check that makes the executive branch answerable to someone. When you bypass it, regardless of your policy goals, you are not reforming government. You are restructuring who government answers to, and that restructuring has a name. It has historical parallels, and none of them end cleanly. Why now? That is the question. This hearing happened against the backdrop of an 84% proposed cut to the State Department budget. Not a trim, not a rationalization. 84%. A 93% cut to educational and cultural exchanges. Over $1 billion removed from narcotics and law enforcement cooperation. These are not the numbers of an administration trying to make foreign aid more efficient. These are the numbers of an administration that has made a strategic decision about what kind of global presence America should have going forward. And Rubio, who once wrote and spoke extensively about the danger of American retreat, who understood viscerally what happens to democracies when the United States steps back, is now the man holding the pen that signs off on that retreat. That tension is the story, not the argument. The tension. If this is the layer of analysis you are not finding in the places you used to look, you already know what to do with this channel. Because here is where this ends. And it does not end in that hearing room. The money is one thing, the precedent is another. What DeLauro put on the record was not just a critique of a budget proposal. It was a documented accusation that programs keeping people alive were shut down without legal authority, that the officials responsible for catching that were removed before they could, and that the human cost is already accumulating. If that accusation is wrong, the administration has every opportunity and every incentive to prove it wrong. Bring the fraud cases to the committee, restore the inspectors general, or explain in public why they were removed. Show the math on how cutting narcotics cooperation by $1.2 billion makes American streets safer. If that accusation is right, even partially right, then what was said in that room today is not a political moment. It is a historical one. And history has a way of making people answer for the distance between who they said they were and what they chose to do when it mattered. This story is not finished. Not even close. Thank you for watching. If this kind of analysis is what you're here for, subscribe, share this with someone who needs to see it, and drop your take in the comments, because this conversation is just getting started.